Okay. Evil influences is the subject that we're going to kind of segue into. And in a way, anything that takes us away from doing God's will is an evil influence. And so that could actually be some of the things that was in the list of, questionable things for us to be anxious about. And so let's look at, I'm not going to go through these again. Okay, this was a separate standalone. Let's look at 1 John for a minute. What's the Bible say about evil influences? Do not love the world or the things in the world. Pretty clear. Right? So things that are in this world that are around us, things that we might pursue, things that we might want, etc., they're not to be what we pursue. They are not to be what we love. Okay? If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. So when we do that, is when we leave the Father behind when we love the world. And that's the challenge, if you will, of evil influences. I think it's partly because we are physical too, right? I mean, we're physical. We're easily impacted by emotion, by desires. We have many distractions. Okay, and I often like to think of, when I think about distractions in the world, I think about going and seeing a magician. Have you ever gone to see a magician? Anyone here seen a magician perform? No? Okay, so the magician spends the whole time distracting you. Okay, you don't really often know that you're being distracted, but he distracts you so that he can then perform whatever the trick is that he's doing to you. His whole thing, the lead up, what he's talking about, his hand movements, everything that he's trying to distract you. And I think that's what the world is trying to do to me and to you, distract us, so that it can get its own ideas into me. For all that is in the world, the desires of the flesh, the desires of the eyes, pride of life, is not from the Father, but is from the world. So the things that we are drawn to are often the things that God would never have created. We created it. Man created those things. Okay. And then verse 17, and the world is passing away along with its desires. So in a way, I think these are pretty powerful verses, because if we love the world, then we're putting our desires into something that's going to pass away. It's not going to exist. It's going away. Okay? And so whoever does the will of God, though, abides forever. So we can build something that is either forever, or we can build something that's going to fall apart. It's going to go away. So we're surrounded. We are surrounded, and I need to check once. Well, that is not coming off good. I'll try to get something brighter next time. But the words at the bottom say we are surrounded by worldly influences. And I think we know that, aren't we? I mean, we live in the world. We're surrounded by them. Okay. I think Proverbs really does a good job. This is an image. Now, all right, so try to let these words create a word image in your mind. Okay. Can a man take fire to his bosom and his clothes not be burned? As a matter of fact, that's one of the forensic, things that they look for, right? If they're looking for an arsonist, you're going to look for someone that maybe has their clothes that are burning, that have some burned parts on it, okay? Or accelerant on it. No, these are, as Ray pointed out, these are rhetorical questions, right? To ask the question is to answer it. Can one walk on hot coals and their feet not be seared? Once in a while, you see some sects of other religions claim, they'll lay out a bed of coals and claim that they can, just calmly walk across. But you never see them calmly walk across. But, that they make make out that they can do that. No, obviously, another rhetorical question, right? So holding the world's influences to ourself is like holding fire to ourselves. It cannot but hurt us, right? It cannot but burn us by doing that. Ephesians talks about uncleanness, okay? Fornication, uncleanness, covetousness. And these are things that we see all around us, okay? They're sort of desires gone wild, right? Unfettered desires for things. One thing is people, the other is goods. Right? We want what they got. We want their stuff. Okay? And we covet it. And covet, I think, takes a place where we put in place steps by which we can get what they have. Okay? Sometimes to take it away from them, and sometimes to just mimic what they got, right? And and that can take a lot of forms. Okay, I've seen it done in the workplace. You see one person trying to tear down another person so that they can take that person's place. Okay? It's not an unusual occurrence. Okay, and so I think we get that. But in verse 11, though, he says, "Have no fellowship with unfruitful works of darkness." Of course, darkness being aligned with the world's desires, but instead expose them. Okay, I think that is a little different than maybe I would have thought of. It's not only that we shouldn't participate in them, but we should expose them for what they are. Okay? So this unfruitful works of darkness, I think, has a very long list, okay, that can be tied to it. And, every time I see the word dark or darkness, I think about what my parents, especially my dad, used to say: nothing good happens after 10:30 at night. Now, maybe that's now 11 o'clock, maybe it's now 10 o'clock. I don't know which direction that should go in. But his point was, you don't need to be out later than that. If you're out later than that, then you're probably up to no good, okay? With the idea, I think, the premise that he's thinking about darkness, right? Okay, we're going to pick up now in Ephesians, the 4th chapter. And I need to see how well you can see that. Not terrible. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 22 says to put off your old self. Okay? And so the idea here is how can we avoid, if you will, how can we identify and how can we avoid evil influences? Okay? And we looked at Ephesians 4:22, which talks about fornication, uncleanness, and covetousness. In verse 23, though, verse 23 says, "And to be renewed in the spirit of your minds." So put off the old self, drop these things from our life, and then put on something, renew our mind, right? Something new, right? And sometimes we have to do a flush job on our brain, and restart, recommit, re-educate, if you will, reorder our lives to do that. In chapter, chapter 4, verse 25 says, "Therefore, having put away falsehood, let each one of you speak the truth." So falsehood is what we need to avoid and put away from ourselves, put off. Truthfulness is what we need to put on. And sometimes that's harder than we realize. Right? We kind of have to prepare ourselves before that we're facing that, okay? So that we know we're going to answer truthfully no matter what we're asked. Okay? In verse 28, Paul talks about stealing. Let the thief no longer steal, but rather let him labor and do honest work. Put off stealing, work with our own hands, And the last part of that verse, I don't want to forget, says so that he may have something to share with anyone in need. So one of the reasons that we work is to take care of our family. The other is to take care of others, okay? To have something that we can share with others that are in need. And down in verse 29, Paul says, let no corrupting talk come out of our mouths. So what's corrupting? Well, he tells us, okay? But only such as is good for building up. So it's corrupt when we tear something down, whether it be if we tear someone's idea about God and about Jesus, if we tear them down by our lives, okay? By what we say, by what we do, we're offering something that's corrupt then, that is not building up. And the idea of edification is to build up. An edifice, what does an edifice do? See statues? Statues are usually on something like a block or something, an edifice. It lifts it up, right? It lifts up that statue. We are instead to do things that are uplifting. Okay? So, continuing, bitterness, I love this word clamor, okay? We are to let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor, okay? What does clamor mean to you? Clamor. Have you ever heard clamor? Have you ever been around it? Yeah. It's disruptive, isn't it? Clamor is probably akin to chaos, right? Causing chaos, being involved in it. Something unordered, if you will. Something that's not productive. And slander to be put away. And he says what we should do instead. We should put on a kind heart, tenderheartedness, forgiveness, okay, instead of bitterness. Bitterness has, I think, a leg in being offended by someone, or you offending someone else, okay, and holding a grudge against someone. So now this, I guess maybe this first part of this verse, he could have just said this at the beginning and then not said anything else. Do not be foolish. Okay, so we need to think about what we're doing, not live a life that is not with both feet on the ground and making decisions from a good thought and productive edification. And instead, we are to do something with understanding God's will. So the way Paul puts it is, do not be foolish, but understand what the will of the Lord is. So I think the idea here about you are foolish if you don't understand what the will of the Lord is. And this I think is is sort of an acknowledgement of a drug that we sometimes don't consider a drug. Right? Drunkenness does exactly the opposite in verse 17, does it not? Someone that's drunk or living that kind of lifestyle is foolish, aren't they? And they aren't trying to understand God's will. In verse 18 says, do not get drunk with wine, for that is debauchery, but be filled with the Spirit. So I think, we see the difficulty we're going to have, don't we, of being in this world. And all of the various things that can impact us, right? That can overcome us. It's going to be difficult for us, right? Okay, I'm going to run through this. This is sort of a, okay, so it looks to me like the transition to here is messing up a little bit on the words, but I'm going to go through this real quick. Things that I was just thinking about, sort of like a mind map, if you will. I don't know if you've ever participated in that, but just what could be considered influential, if you will, and what could be considered sources of that in this world. And the original lesson that this was taken from focused a lot on the TV, on the television, but that's sort of aged, if you will, now. All right, so I tried to think of it more in terms of today. Obviously, television is in the list. Okay, we have access to so many things there that fall into the categories that Paul just listed. Right? Dabbling in myths, I think, is something though we don't talk a lot about. Right? And yet, I saw just today a list of the top 10 cults that still are in existence today. Okay, and these people believe everything under the sun, and yet many still they still get much money given to them. Many people try to join that. Myths, dreaming things up out of whole cloth that do not match the Bible. Associations, I think we know the Bible teaches, and I think I have a verse in here somewhere. The Bible teaches us, corrupt communications or corrupt associations, okay, will corrupt us, okay? And so our associations, I think, tend to be probably the main source, a lot of times, of our wrong influences, okay, in the world. Music, I think music and television, internet, parties, etc., they kind of fall into a category where they support each other. And one is even worse than the other, if you will. It's like they try to be worse than the other. I know that there's music that has words and it's not just the words, it's the thoughts behind them. It's what they represent, what the words say, okay, takes up residence, if you will. And I think sometimes music, it sort of puts your mind into a special place that is easier for those thoughts to get into your mind. Okay, they are more easily moving you, and that's what music does sometimes, right? It moves you, and so some of the things that it says for young people to do. I just saw the other day, 2 days ago, a young person died. Doing some TikTok chip challenge where you eat this chip that has two of the hottest peppers known. Okay, if you know the Schofield list, okay, these are at the top 2 of the Schofield list, okay, of hotness, and the person died. And from participating in that. That's what we have access to these days. The young people do. Okay, enough said. I think, though, you get the idea that there's a lot of things out there, right? I'm going to go down this list, and I want to quickly say at the top are sort of what they represent, or maybe what helps support them, and then on the left-hand side is the danger. So idleness. So being idle, okay, that's gonna contribute to idleness. Boredom, lust, curiosity, habit, okay. Social media. I'm not going to go through them all because I've just heard the second bell. But I am going to go down the list, okay, real quick here. Our associations, television. Okay, these are just reasons, if you will, maybe that we participate in some of these things. You can see for yourself. Now, these are my ideas. I would love to have yours. I don't have time. But I will give this to you if you wish to. And okay, so that's the list that we went through a while ago, and it was just an attempt to try to say why do we pursue these things? Okay, what's the reason? What could possibly be the reason that we do that? Okay, thank you.